thank you, Ms. Geckos, for being on the show, and it's good to have you here. Now, can you tell us where were you raised at?
In the suburb of D.C., Maryland, out of D.C., Montgomery County is where I grew up. We moved there when I was in 12th grade. And I actually do want to take a moment to say that Howard University is near there and is an absolutely outstanding university in D.C. So I'll take that credential too, if I may. But yeah, I grew up there as a 12th grader and lived with my folks out there, went to high school there, went to college in Maryland, law school in the D.C. area. So just kind of stayed there locally. I was attracted by the California sunshine. Okay.
Well, having said that, not so much Howard, but D.C. and Baltimore. So you grew up and probably lived around a lot of black folks, or were you excluded from all of that?
No, actually, I mean, our county, it's very diverse. It's extremely diverse. And actually, that's one of my most favorite things about being in the D.C. area and the Maryland suburbs is just that there's a variety of people. I'm used to it. I like it.
Amen.
And it really matters to me. I think that's what the world's all about. And sometimes when you go to certain parts of the United States where you see all one color face, I think that's boring.
Yeah. We need some diversity. Mix it on up.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. So how long have you been living in San Diego?
You know what? I have been here 3 separate times. I've come here and go back and come here, go back. Most recently, my husband and I moved out here in 2010.
Okay.
And rejoined the U.S. Attorney's office.
Okay. Rejoined?
Yeah, I actually was a Department of Justice lawyer early on in my career. And when you're a DOJ attorney out of Washington, they send you to different parts of the country where they may need help with different cases or for whatever reason. And I got that lucky chance. I got to come out here in 93 and stayed till 97. Okay. Then went back. Then was assigned to other U.S. attorneys' offices headquartered out of D.C. Then moved back out here 2004 to 2006. Okay. Then went back and did more consumer protection and fraud. And then when Laura Duffy became U.S. Attorney, and I had met my husband, who used to be in the Marine Corps and had gone to boot camp here in San Diego. We said, you know what? If it's meant to be, let's put in an application. You've got ties to San Diego. I've got ties to San Diego. If it's meant to be, we'll head west. If not, we'll stay in Maryland. That's been home. And so. And
how long has it been here? The last time?
I'm now 6 years here.
6 years. And so how long you been married then, when you said you met your husband?
About 6 years. I got married in 2009.
All right.
I'm a late bloomer.
Okay. Well, that's all right. That's all right. You have any kids?
He was worth the wait.
That's right.
I don't. I wish I did, but I've got great nieces and nephews.
That's it. I got a lot of nephews and nieces also. Even raised a few of them.
Yeah.
So, was it always your goal to become a federal prosecutor?
You know, if you talk to my parents, they'd probably say the way I behaved at the kitchen table, that I probably was. I remember my dad recently always saying to me, you know, you're not the lawyer in this family. Right. When I was a 6th grader. No, my dream actually was to become a journalist. I really was sure I was going to be a writer. I loved writing and reporting, meeting all kinds of people. Okay. And my interests really changed when I went to college, and I had a great professor. That's why I'm a real believer in mentors and role models in education and in life, because they really can change the path of a young person. And I just got so entranced with my very first law class, which was about constitutional law, you know, equal protection under the law. What does the Constitution protect? And I just thought, gosh, you know, I've not ever had the honor of serving in our nation's military. I don't serve the United States that way. Right. But being a federal prosecutor, my humble way of serving is by saying, hi, I'm Marietta Geckos and I work for the United States. And as I was telling you outside, Bishop, that I know it might sound trite, but very much I really feel that this job is an incredible honor. Amen. I never forget that I work for the United States taxpayer. The taxpayer pays my salary, and I think there comes a trust with that you are expected to use that authority and the power with wisdom, firmness, and compassion at the same time.
Amen. That's all. Now, when you see, now I always thought you was like always with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I never made a distinction between DOJ and U.S. Attorney. What's the difference between the two?
That's a great question. The way we sometimes explain it to folks is that sometimes people affectionately call DOJ or Maine Justice, the mothership. And so you have that, and there are 94 federal, 93, 94, depending on what you're going to count exactly, federal districts in the United States.
Okay.
And each district has a U.S. Attorney's Office. For example, in California, there are 4 federal districts. The Southern District of California, Central District, which is LA, Eastern District, which is Sacramento, and Northern District, which is San Fran.
Okay.
And so those 4 districts have 4 U.S. attorneys. So Laura Duffy, our U.S. attorney, is the head law enforcement officer here.
Okay.
Now, you may have a state like Delaware that'll just be called the District of Delaware, so the whole state is a district.
Okay.
Or the District of Wyoming, or the District of Montana. So that in those cases, the entire state is a district. Bigger districts like California or New York will be divided.
So California's 4 districts.
Yes. And
so Southern is the district that you're part of, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that covers all. I think Laura, when she was on, she said covers here and Imperial counties.
Centro.
Okay, and so it's all just that's really the southern.
Yeah.
So what would LA be considered central?
Central district. And actually, years ago, the San Diego wasn't its own district. It was a division. It used to be a division, but it became so populated, it became its own district.
Oh, okay.
So interestingly, when you're talking about, for example, like smart on crime, you might have a national policy coming out of Washington, but then each district is expected to look at what's going on locally and tailor something. And that's where I got the pleasure of meeting you a few weeks ago at the CAST meetings to see what is happening locally. So yeah, there's 94 U.S. attorneys' offices, and that kind of filters down. So I was employed by Maine Justice in D.C., and sometimes they will dispatch lawyers to assist in different districts, but you can also be hired by a particular district to be an assistant U.S. attorney from that district.
Wow.
And I really love the job.
Wow.
It's a great job.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So what is it like working with U.S. Attorney Laura Duffy?
Oh, you should have warned me so I could prep for that, because I bet she's listening. Laura is an outstanding boss. No, she really, really is. Laura is a very wise and compassionate person. She is very deliberate. She's very reflective. She's a very deep person. She takes her responsibilities incredibly seriously, because she realizes, as the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office, when you've got a ton of prosecutors in her office, what she does and says impacts all the people. And I find her very open to hearing all views, even views that might not be popular. She's not an impulsive person. She doesn't just say things off the top of her head and just go with it. I think she especially likes it when someone disagrees. She really gives that person a voice.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, what is the difference between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the state prosecutors?
Another really great question. In some ways, there's very little difference.
Okay.
Because if you think of what a U.S. attorney does, our job is to enforce the federal statutes on the books. A district attorney, their job is to enforce the state statutes that are on the books. So we're all prosecutors. In fact, San Diego has an amazing DEA's office. The prosecutors are top-notch. And in fact, when I was looking at what they were doing they don't have smart on crime, but what they were doing for diversion courts and that kind of thing, they are an amazing national model with their drug courts and veterans courts and juvenile courts. I really have enjoyed learning about that office and working with people from that office. It's an amazing partner for our office, too. That's why we're trying very much to work together.
That's great. All right. So, what is a federal crime?
What is a federal crime?
Yes. What would be like, versus when federal U.S. attorneys may pick up a case, and sometimes the state picks up a case. What is a federal crime?
Really, the exact definition would be. The boring definition would be, so I'll race through the boring definition so you don't lose, not a listener while I'm speaking. But a federal crime really is a crime that the U.S. Congress has passed and has said it should be a federal crime. And the same thing goes for a state crime. Now, sometimes those could be similar offenses. There are drug offenses in the state purview. There are drug offenses in the federal purview. So in some cases, it can be a similar conduct that is criminalized in two different sovereigns, by two different sovereigns. So that really is it. You could actually, there's a terrible saying. It's not really terrible, but it's true when they say, "Oh, well, it's a federal. Don't make a federal case out of it." Well, the federal code book is huge, and so all the crimes are found in Title 18. They could be anything from fraud to drugs to illegal immigration to really anything. There's anything you can think of that somebody. Their national security offenses, their homicides, there's all kinds of things.
Yeah, because I know I had I'm a former gang member, and one of my homeboys I used to run with, after I got in church, he got locked up and he's doing federal time, but it's for having a gun. And a lot of times you think, okay, that's why are you making a federal crime out of that? But I guess there are laws that govern both.
Yeah, it's very serious.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those are taken very seriously. Guns, they're usually 5 years. Was it felon in possession? Was he a felon when he was in possession? 922G. Yeah, that usually is 5 years. And Congress felt so strongly about it that they didn't just make it 5 years. It usually runs consecutive to any other offense. And I think you brought up a great point. That, in fact, I was at a meeting with you and you made a really good point that I never forgot. You said, you know what? We all have our jobs to do, and sometimes we would agree to disagree. So I can tell that you're not thrilled over that. But under federal law, they try to send a message, how deadly the weapons can be. But I understand your perspective. I just respectfully disagree with it.
And that's cool, because I know laws have to be enforced, but a lot of times it seems like and that's where I think we're getting to the smart crime laws, or the reforming the criminal justice system. But it just seems like sometimes a case that should be state, federal picks up. Sometimes, and I understand, and I know you're not here for the RICOs and all that, but like when you look at the collaboration that law enforcement, with federal law enforcement and state, and you look at City, San Diego, and so on. One things that I realize is that when they're working together on a task force, if it's a law that they'd be more successful in prosecuting in federal, they'll let the U.S. Attorney take that piece, and then the state will take other different pieces.
What do you mean by more successful? Just so I can understand your question. What do you mean more successful?
Let me give you an example. Okay. Like with sex crimes, like sex trafficking. Under the state statute, far as under the STEP Act, which is the Street Terrorism Enforcement Prevention Act that deals with gangs, documentation, enhancement laws, and gang crimes. Sex trafficking right now is not a gang crime. So a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but what I have found has happened over the past couple of years is that on that piece, the federal government would pick up and indict guys on RICO indictments tied into the sex trafficking and gangs and so on, versus dealing with it on the state side of the gang, because it's not a sex crime. So my point of it is that prosecute the guys, but prosecute them like you would prosecute an ordinary person. If a person was living out in Miramar or La Jolla and got arrested for the same thing, he's not going to face all the enhancements that an individual living in a black community would face, because in a black community, he's probably documented as a gang member. I was talking with two young men yesterday, and they're documented as gang members, but one of them was saying, I'm not a gang member. My friends are. I hang out with them. I said, have you ever told the police that you're a gang member? No. Have you ever done it on, like on, because they're young, Facebook or anywhere else, tattoos, anything to say or confess that you were a gang member to anybody? He said, no, I don't do that. They're just my friends. I'm always hanging out with them. So he got documented as such. So now if a gang crime is committed, they can tie all these guys in there. He get enhancements and so on. But if you see a guy out in Miramar or La Jolla and he commit the same crime, he won't get all the enhancements laws, even if it's sex trafficking, because they tied into gang and it becomes a RICO indictment and all these other type of laws that cover that. So that's kind of like where we come in. That's why I think smarter crime, when we get into it, is going to be good to get into, because a lot of times what we look at is the unfairness of how laws are implemented when you're dealing with people of color versus dealing with white race and so on when it comes to enforcing laws and crimes. So that's kind of what I meant by that, in that sense, is that a lot of times blacks and brown folks and Asians seem to be prosecuted at a more severe and punitive level than you'll find with whites. So that's what I meant by that. But so let me actually, before you promoted into your new role, what did you do? And I thought I saw something in that Laura Duffy said about reactive crime section.
Right, but you know what? Can I just step back just a minute?
Yes.
Because just a couple of things I just want to share with you. One of the things that we are absolutely against, and I know Ms. Duffy is too, is disparate prosecutions. And that's not something that our office has looked to be a part of at all. We do have a very robust section in our office that does sex trafficking.
Right.
And I know the teams of attorneys who do it. They're nationally recognized. And my understanding of the cases that I've been aware of the last 6 years has involved defendants of all races. So I'm not saying you are incorrect. Absolutely not. Many times we're looking at the world through a different lens. I've got my lens, you've got your lens. But I can tell you that it's nothing, as far as I understand, remotely targeted. You're saying it kind of feels that way, but I think there's some things to consider. First of all, I do want to point out that I am not an expert on how the local police target gangs, but I know there is something along the lines, and I know you can research this too, but I was looking at this yesterday, that there are certain things, certain criteria that need to be met by a police officer to actually document somebody, and they don't even need them all. They have to be certain things that are present, like I'm not even going to list them because I'm going to be wrong. I remember being surprised at how many different ones there were. So I'm not surprised that the young man you were speaking to, I'm sure if he was documented, there were some things ticked off on that list that he may not know about, but that the police in good faith actually did that. And I do want to say one other thing, an issue that's near and dear to me, especially since I was telling you there was human trafficking earlier this week, a big symposium.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that human trafficking is a $150 billion with a B dollar industry in the world? I had no idea. There are 20 million people that are trafficked.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
And 5.5 million children are sex trafficked. So in light of opening day that we just had, but we won't talk about the results of opening day, Bishop, okay? I remember I'm from D.C., so I'm a Nats girl. But think about this a moment. You've been to Petco Park, right? And you've seen
well, I've seen it. I haven't been inside it.
The pictures. It seats about 42,000 people. Imagine, if you will, 42,000 chairs filled with kids. Okay?
Right.
Now times that by 130. That's 5.5 million kids. So that is what the sex trafficking trade is in the world. And unfortunately, San Diego is right up there. So I didn't mean to hold off my own issue on Smart on Crime, but I really want you to be aware.
I want,
It's not about where we're most successful. This is a serious issue that is finally getting the light of day. And that's why I'm actually very excited about your voice in the community where you can make a difference in young girls especially that have the boyfriend that's, flashing them exciting, prospects and giving them attention. And you'll see in the little binder I gave you that sometimes these girls find themselves in a situation where they didn't realize that they're going to be separated from their folks. And so I'm not saying everyone, but you can really help with that issue in the young women who are around. So didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no. I mean, hey, look.
Stress that because Laura prides herself on being as transparent as possible.
Right.
She came on your show. She sent me to you, and will keep sending me to you every month. So
right. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Got to be open. And we welcome that. Can I tell you a little bit about Smart on Crime and some of the changes that are going on? This is a new direction for the government, and it actually goes to your point. We cannot prosecute our way or incarcerate our way to safer communities.
Right.
You had mentioned to me a little bit about the crime bill of 94 and the effect that had with crack, 10 to 1, incredible sentences. And this is something that the department has recognized, and you hear commentary now about people who voted for it. Now there were some good things in it. There were assault weapons banned, there were things like that. But the result that has happened, there are 1.5 million inmates in prison in the United States. And the staggering statistic that shocked me is the United States has 25% of all the world's inmates. but only 5% of the world's population. Think about that. I mean, 25% of all the world's inmates are in the United States, but 5% of the world's population. So that is some of what is driving this. So what changes can be made? You can't just, there are other alternatives to incarceration. Now, it does not mean that we don't have to be tough on crime and firm on crime, on our most violent offenders.
Now, let me ask you a question in regards to that. What is the difference that you would say, between smart on crime and tough on crime?
I think they blend together. That's another great question, and I'll explain. Smart on crime is really about using the resources in the wisest way to get the most positive result. And what we're having done this new cycle, these new initiatives put forth by Eric Holder and now Loretta Lynch, criminal justice system usually just meant investigate cases and prosecute cases for the most part.
Right.
Now we are being directed from Washington and through the U.S. attorneys is that we should have a prevention aspect and a reentry aspect, because if we can, for example, prevent some of these younger kids from even entering the criminal justice system. That's lives saved. That's people who go on to become positive members of the community, and that is court costs and litigation and lawyers' fees, etc. That we don't have to expend. You also have reentry, so you can use those for the most serious prosecutions. That cost. Reentry, the same thing. How is that smart on crime? Well, if somebody has finished their sentence and they come back out into the community and they try to get a job and they are having trouble getting that job, they are very likely to recidivate, just to commit the crime again. And the statistics are pretty high of recidivism when someone comes out and they don't have the support. So if somebody is exiting prison and they're given some services like how to do a resume or how to do an interview or what can we do, with that felony, the job prospects kind of thing. If you're getting those people who are coming out, who are staying out, and then you're diverting a whole other class of people who are never making it into the criminal justice system, where are your prosecutors focusing? On the homicides, the most violent crimes, the crimes against the most vulnerable populations. So that is the theory behind being smarter on crime. You can put the resources to be tough on the most serious offenses, but if you can work on prevention efforts and on reentry efforts, the end result is hopefully smarter, but still tougher.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier when we look at that, because I know you will have offenders who are low level, nonviolent. And you have many people that are like that. But I think one of the problems that we have with the criminal justice system is the narrative and how that narrative plays out in the media and in the public, and frame the way people think. And because like what you just said, dealing with, we still want to be tough on crime in the sense of dealing with the most violent and so on. But a lot of times, what we were talking about earlier, as far as like with RICO indictments, and when you sweep a net up a mass group of people, many times, a lot of those folks that have been swept up, the narrative has been painted that they're violent, that they're this, that they're this horrible criminal, where for the most part, they were just hanging out with folks that were like that. They hadn't broken a law or committed a crime in that area or of whatever the people are being charged with, but they've probably just associated with these guys and may have committed some minor offenses. But then they swept up under a RICO and looking at 20 to life or whatever the RICO charge brings. And so it goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we was talking about sex trafficking, because, a lot of people are afraid to touch on sex trafficking because of what you just said, because you got little children that's being victimized and all these women that are being victimized, some men too, that's been victimized, and something has to be done about that. And we want something to be done about that. But at the same time, we want fairness. And what we see in our community many times is that the laws are not used fairly across the board. And so when you might have an individual here that's may not be black, maybe white, and I use that example, and he may be charged with a sex crime, but he's not going to look at the same charges that an individual that get caught up being documented as a gang member would. There is some extra enhancement laws and so on that he'll be looking at.
There are some pretty stiff sentences for. I believe I don't want to speak out of school because my biggest concern is saying something that's incorrect to you. Your listeners deserve better, but I do believe we've had cases where there have been sex trafficking cases that have also been charged as RICO where appropriate. And you talk about the key word, which is fairness here. That is the number one thing that we all should be after.
Right.
And I just want to stress, and I can see there's some things that we'll just meet in the middle and raise a glass or whatever of ginger ale, of course. But you can't, when you said somebody was just present, you cannot be, it's not a crime to be associated with somebody. So there has to be something more. And so I'm sure you've sat in plenty of trials before that the judge, and again, we talked about this before, but you're roping me into this RICO thing. You're good. But so am I.
Exactly, you're a lawyer.
No, but seriously, you can't. There's actually something called the mere presence instruction. That it is not criminal to be just associated. So when you said that and they got looped up, I guarantee you, with all respect, Bishop, there was more than being associated. You know, there has to be some sort of active involvement, and the judge will instruct the jury what they have to find for each person legally for it to fit. And if the government hasn't proved it, then there's not going to be a guilty verdict. And there shouldn't be a guilty verdict. If the government doesn't prove the case, there should not be a guilty verdict on that particular thing. But I understand what you're saying, that there can be some frustrations, but we are following the laws.
But facts also. I'm mentoring a young man right now. It wasn't federal, state. I'm mentoring a young man right now that is on probation, been to prison, and he got caught up in a gang conspiracy case where he committed no crime, just by association with the guys taking pictures on Facebook and things like that.
Wait.
I can have you to meet him.
Wait a minute, you're saying he committed no crime?
He committed no crime. It's like you said, it's not a crime to be associated with gang members.
There had to be some. I don't. You know what? I'm going to give deference to you.
Trust me.
You know this
Trust
guy.
me in this.
But I only can tell you about the law. I can't imagine that somebody has been convicted if they've committed no crime.
Not convicted. He made a plea deal with them.
Still, you can't make a deal to plead guilty if you haven't been committed of a crime. And also, no defense lawyer would have somebody plead guilty if there was no crime. Some of his friends committed crimes, was charged with crimes like murder and things like that, but not him. But he still pled guilty?
Yeah, because when you're looking at 25 to life, 40 years, and then 25 to life, and then he move it down and say we'll give you 3. You know, what you're going to do. We give you 2, we give you 5, we give you 10. So people jump on that because they're like, oh, well, I know, I'm not going to I don't have a fair chance in the system. That's the way they look at it. And so therefore they make deals. And that happens all the time. That happens. I see that happen. I myself, when I was a gangbanger, there's a couple of times I pleaded to charges that I did not commit. One time was assault on a police officer. I did not do that, but I pleaded to it anyway. Another time was car theft. I did not steal that car, but I pleaded to it anyway because my lawyer told me I didn't have a chance of winning. And this is the best deal to take. So I experienced it myself in the criminal justice system that, people do plead guilty to crimes that they did not commit because that's the best way. It's better to do 3 years than 25 years or 10 years. And so sometimes, you have to take the deal that's thrown.
I'm going to have to respect your opinion on this, and I do, because you're telling me from a pace of experience that I was not at. I can only share with you, Bishop, is the prosecutor's perspective, and even just this prosecutor's perspective. and what I mean by that is we have ethical obligations that if we are charging someone, you don't just charge somebody. There are numerous sections of review where your colleagues are asked lots of questions of you. You've got to spell out who potentially should be charged, what exactly is the evidence per the person, and it doesn't always make it through that review, and it shouldn't make it through the review. So I can't speak to these particular cases, but for this individual to have been charged, I am sure there was a very thorough, thoughtful analysis of what the evidence was that the United States or that the DA, I don't know if it was a state case, would actually put forward, and that's how we proceed with this stuff. So I get what you're saying.
And I know that's the idea.
I just want you to get what I'm saying.
We're not in a perfect system. I know that's the idea.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're good.
So let me ask you something. Well, what is compassionate release?
Okay. Basically, that is a mechanism where if there is a showing of extraordinary and compelling circumstances, that the Bureau of Prisons, I believe is the one that runs this, has the authority, and I don't know exactly if there's supposed to be a court order or not, but it could be things that relate to, in fact, I even gave you a little memo earlier that I just found for you too, because this is a topic that I want to spend more time getting more familiar with. There we go. I'd actually written it out here.
Okay.
Okay, why don't you sing a song while I'm finding the page for your listeners, because I know you have a lovely voice, you know.
My daughter and my wife does all the singing, not me.
I
They do the
highly
singing.
doubt that.
Yeah.
I've seen some different factors. For example, if the inmate is elderly, very elderly, if there are circumstances in which there has been the death or incapacitation of a family member, caregiver of an inmate's child, circumstances in which the spouse's registered partner of an inmate has become incapacitated. So apparently my understanding of this, and I'm learning as I go too, is that the Bureau of Prisons has to consider whether the inmate's release would pose a danger to the safety of any other person. And so from what I've been reading about it, this is getting more attention. Because, we kind of skipped over some of this stuff, but the crazy other stat is $1.1 billion is for inmate medical care. $1.1 billion is for inmate medical care. So if some of the elderly prisoners, if there's a way to give them compassionate release, if there are other ways, as you can tell, you've probably seen on the news, it's a different issue, but the president has been considering clemency and commutation of sentencing. That's the Office of the Pardon Attorney. I think there's been about 248 so far. So they're looking for ways to kind of reduce the overburdened prison population. And now you can see they're doing it from both ends. Instructions to prosecutors to charge far less minimum mandatory sentences, but focus on the more severe criminals. And on the back end, are there inmates that it is compassionate for them to be released? Or alternatively, are there inmates that the sentences should merit some sort of commutation? And I believe all those things are especially the commutation issue is very much one of President Obama's initiatives. So
before because I know we run out of time, but I did want to find out, do you all have any reentry programs?
Specific reentry, I'll tell you what we have is because that's one of the new directives of Smart on Crime. We actually have a reentry coordinator, and so we are part of the Reentry Roundtable of San Diego. So we are looking for the most efficient way to kind of help with reentry. So there is a lot being done. I just read something the other day about our office's probation office that's a reentry unit, the first of its kind nationally, to help inmates get out into the community, assist them with resumes, assist them with workshops, assist them with getting jobs. So again, Laura Duffy in our office is evaluating how can we best help. And just an idea that we've had is we've been comparing with other U.S. attorneys' offices. As we said, there's 94, and there's some back east that have actually had some symposiums and invited the business community of their towns in, the biggest employers, and said, don't freak out, but here is why you may want to consider hiring a vetted prior offender, because that person has served their time, they've paid their debt to society, but they want to get out and have a life. And what is the best way to have people move forward is good housing, jobs, employment opportunities, and a chance to get there. So we are interested in working with that, and that's something I'm going to be looking at too, is can we replicate something like that in San Diego?
Now, before we close, I got to ask you this question.
Okay, I'm going to leave right now. Where's the door? I don't know what it's going to be.
I don't want to get you in trouble, so if you can't answer, just say you can't answer. Laura. I know a lot of stuff is political, but former President Bill Clinton got into a confrontation with Black Lives Matter protesters. This is what he said in defending his crime bill of 1994, and I quote, You're living in a country where young African Americans think their number one threat now is from police officers, he said. When I signed the crime bill, they knew what their number one threat was. It was from gangs, making money out of cocaine, taking teenage kids, hopping them up, giving them guns, and telling them to go kill other teenagers to prove their bones. It's different. That's end of quote. Now, I don't see where the narrative has changed, and some of the things he's talking about was going on back then is going on now as far as the narrative that is played out there. And Black Lives Matters has brought to the forefront mass incarceration and police brutality. But when I go into courtrooms, the narrative that former Bill Clinton used to justify his crime bill is still being used today about gang members or some of the things we were just talking about. What can we do to change the narrative being used in the criminal prosecution of young black men?
Okay, so the door is over there.
And I know you so it's not a fair question because you don't have enough time to answer it.
Okay, did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
The listeners, he's saying it's not a fair question.
And I want to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District, for being friends with us and working with us and really bringing about a change. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and you know what? But you ask a fair question, and I may not be the right person to give it a full answer. But
Right.
we're joking here, but we're not joking because
Right.
you're saying this from the heart, and I
Yes.
get it. That at the end of the day, you know, I wouldn't necessarily agree with you that that is the narrative, but you have every right to say that it is. But I don't agree that it is. But regardless of that, we got to look at where we're going now. Where are we going now? You have got directives to 94 U.S. Attorney's offices to do something I have never seen in my career, but it started in 2013,
Right.
which is do not charge the minimum mandatory drug amounts.
Right.
It used to be 10 years, 10 years, 10 years for these smallest
they're
amounts of
changed.
crack. So it is happening. It is definitely happening. And I want to segue into another last great point that you made too, is no matter who's talking or what the position is, whether it's a protester or whatever, I love that we're having this conversation because we have brought down to a micro level, which things that should happen more perhaps on a national level.
Right.
That each side should be quiet a moment and let the other talk.
Right.
And that's what we've done here. And sometimes we don't see that nationally.
Right.
Because what's that old famous saying from the colonial days saying, I disagree with what you're saying, but I defend to the death the right to say it. You know, and so actually I haven't disagreed with a lot.
Right.
I think you and I are we're headed in the same direction. What do we want? We want young people safe, we want them educated, we want them to live long, we want them out and functioning in society.
Absolutely.
So on that, we 100% agree.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I most definitely appreciate that. So I want to thank you, Assistant U.S. Attorney Miss Marietta Geckos, for being on our show today. It was an honor and privilege to have you on. We will have you to come back so we can have some more discussion on this, dealing with smart on crime. So we most definitely appreciate you. And I want to encourage all our listeners before we close out to come on and by and visit our church, Charity Apostolic Church, 610 South 30th Street, San Diego, California, 92113, 11:30 on Saturday. So come by and check us out and worship with us. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next week for another great show on What's Happening Now on KBLKradio.com. And thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you.
Hey America, we're your pets, and this song's dedicated to those people who don't have health insurance yet.
Enroll, we say, we want you to be okay. Enroll, we say, take care of people for goodness sake. There's a plan for every budget, so don't accept defeat. Now you can get covered and still buy me treats. Enroll! So listen to me.